All right, Michael, I think both of us feel pretty good that Brian Flores' dismissal as head coach of the Miami Dolphins was not a setback, but a setup, that he is going to land on his feet, hopefully during this coaching cycle. He is reported to be a hot candidate, understandably so, for somebody that's won 19 games the last 2 years. The interview requests are already starting, and Chicago is talking to him about that vacant head coach position, a Chicago coaching search that is being guided in part by Bill Polian, who head coach Tony Dungy knows quite well, of course, from their Super Bowl winning days in Indianapolis. So, Coach Dungy, would love to, we're still unpacking the fallout from Brian Flores' firing in Miami. I know you got your ear to the street. I know you know people, you talk to people. What do you know and what do you think about what happened with Brian Flores and why it didn't work out in Miami? Because that's still, even though we have theories, it is still a shocker given the rebuilding job he'd done.
No, it was a shock to me, and you don't expect it. You mentioned 19 wins in 2 years. That's hard to do. So you don't expect it. So the only thing I can say is there's got to be something more to the story. It can't be just on wins and losses and direction of the team. They're getting better. They're competing. They beat the New England Patriots twice. That's not a coach you get rid of unless something else is going on.
And what did you think about just his ability, though, to go in there and turn that I shouldn't say turn the franchise around. They didn't win a championship. They never got to the playoffs with him, even though 9-8 this year, 10-6 last year. But what did you think about that, just going around and shifting the culture where they could get to a point where not only could they beat the Patriots twice this year, Brian Flores is 4-2 versus Bill Belichick. What did you think about his ability to just kind of turn the franchise around a little bit?
Well, I thought the team was definitely going in the right direction, and I'm a voter on the AP poll, and I was considering voting for Brian for Coach of the Year. I looked, there's some coaches have done some great things, but Rich Bisaccia stepping in and taking that situation and taking the Raiders to the playoffs, you got to give that some consideration, right? Vrabel, #1 seed with all the injuries that Tennessee's had, but Brian Flores, you lose 7 games in a row, and the team doesn't quit. They come on and they get themselves back in playoff contention. That to me was remarkable. So I thought there's no question. You watch their team, they respect him, they responded to him, they're moving in the right direction. So again, it was very much of a surprise to me.
And you look at the reaction from those players that responded to him, it speaks to, they seem not only shocked but disappointed to see Brian Flores move on. So we mentioned his interview with the Bears. I wonder, and again, you're carefully monitoring the interview cycle as somebody who advocates on behalf of black coaches, as somebody who holds the league accountable when it comes to the Rooney Rule practices. I wonder what other interviews, other than Brian Flores in Chicago, have caught your eye or have even encouraged you about maybe it's somebody we need to keep our eye on, maybe it's a situation and a fit for a coach that really stood out to you based on the interviews that you've taken note of so far?
Well, I don't know who's talked to who. Chicago, and I've been on record, I talked about Jim Caldwell in Jacksonville. I think that's a perfect fit with a young quarterback, and you look at Jim Caldwell's record, all you have to do, look at Peyton Manning's record, pre-Jim Caldwell, post-Jim Caldwell. Look at Matthew Stafford's numbers after Jim Caldwell got there to Detroit. Look at Joe Flacco during the Super Bowl year when Jim Caldwell was the offensive coordinator, matched up with his other years, and what he did after that. You can see what Jim does with young quarterbacks. So if I was in Chicago or Jacksonville, that'd be one of the first guys I would call. Okay, you have to look at Leslie Frazier
Caldwell.
In Chicago.
I like the ring to that. I like the ring to that. Call Caldwell. There you go. That's the headline. Gotcha.
I remember when Mike Ditka got hired in Chicago, and I had coached against Mike in the past, and I just said, I don't know if I see this. But George Halas at that time, he said, hey, I want somebody who knows the history of the Bears, somebody who's passionate about the Bears, that the Bears is a big deal to them. And Mike Ditka fit in perfectly there. Okay, Leslie Frazier is a guy who knows the history of Chicago. He knows what wins. He knows good defense. And Leslie Frazier has been in a situation now where they took a young quarterback in Buffalo and watched Josh Allen mature, and they built the team around him. And Leslie has that Chicago background. He's got a Super Bowl ring from the Bears. He knows how that team is supposed to function. So that's another guy that I would look at. And there's a ton of good candidates. I live here in Tampa. And yes, Bruce Arians has done a tremendous job here, but all Bruce talks about is Byron Leftwich and Todd Bowles. And maybe one of those guys is already set to step in when Bruce retires here. I don't know that, but I would talk to those two guys too. Championship pedigree. They've been around it, done a great job. So there's a number of guys who we've got to keep an eye out for, and I just hope these teams actually really go through the process. Take their time, investigate, look at the candidates, and don't just say, hey, I'm going to pick the guy from the Super Bowl winning team, or I'm going to pick this guy because he's a known commodity.
I like the way you said that, Coach. You said go through the process. You hope these teams do it. And unfortunately, we have to have the Rooney Rule in place because some teams, without it, I mean, even with it, the teams' records are not necessarily great when it comes to, broadening the field, broadening the search, and hiring diverse candidates. But how do you know, from your experience, how do you know if a team is serious about its interviewing process? Because they can bring you in and still not be serious. How do you know as you're sitting there, hey, they're really taking me seriously?
You really don't know. You hope you get a chance to really impress someone. I remember one of the first interviews I had, I was a young coach still in my early 30s, and the Green Bay Packers had an opening. And I was surprised. I got a call and went through the whole process, and it was great for me, a learning experience and answering questions and trying to formulate my program. But then I asked the guy at the end of the interview, I said, hey, tell me, what exactly are you looking for? And he said, well, really what we want is somebody with head coaching experience and somebody who's really strong on the offensive side of the ball. And I thought to myself, why am I here? You want an offensive coordinator who's been a head coach. I'm 33 years old. I've never been a head coach, and I coach defense. Why am I here? Are you really serious about this? So you just don't know, and they can go through the process. And unfortunately, I think that's what some teams have done. They said, we've got this Rooney Rule, we've got to interview certain people, but we really know who we're going to hire. We know we're going to hire Urban Meyer. We may have 15 different interviews, but we really aren't serious about it. We're hiring Urban Meyer. But then you have other people that go through the process. When I got the job in Tampa, I was not the first candidate. And I went through 3 or 4 different interviews with them, and it took a long time. We didn't make the playoffs that year in Minnesota, and I think my first interview was kind of late December. And it was toward the end of January before I got hired. But they knew me by that time, I knew them, and it ended up being a good fit. But teams have to slow down. They have to not worry about looking like they didn't get their first choice. That was part of the deal when I got to Tampa. They wanted Steve Spurrier. He didn't take the job. They wanted Jimmy Johnson. He went to Miami. So, hey, look, too bad. We got our 3rd choice or our 4th choice or our 5th choice. But if you get the right guy, it doesn't matter.
Coach, I'd love to go into the process of marriages, because the word that was tossed around when Brian Flores was let go was relationships or lack thereof, right? But you look at Chicago and Minnesota, cleaned house, GM and head coach, starting from scratch, right? But then you got Jacksonville retains Trent Baalke. We know the fans aren't happy about that. Miami still has Chris Greer. He's the common denominator with all of these changes. And then even in New York, Joe Judge, and I know you'd never advocate for a colleague or fellow coach to lose his job, but Dave Gettleman retires. What is the thought process, or what should be the thought process? Because I'm like, if you got a head coach that is struggling with it, and maybe it's because of the general manager, who knows, but to bring in another general manager who's going to have to inherit that head coach just feels like the wrong way to build your organization. Like either you're together or you're not at the top. Like, what's your thought process on that particular process of pairing?
It's difficult if you're not winning to sell that to the community, to sell that to the fans, to sell that to the team. Hey, we've got a head coach here, and we think he's really good. He hasn't really won, but we think he's good. Now we're going to bring in a new GM to work with him, and it's going to be roses. Hopefully it works out. A lot of times it doesn't work that way. I'll tell you, though, I can speak from experience. I stepped into 2 situations where the general manager was there, and it wasn't a clean house operation. In Tampa, they hadn't won for a long time, and there was questions. Oh, can they scout? They've made mistakes. They've had busts in the drafts. Rich McKay, how good is he? Well, Rich McKay was very good, and I ended up, you talk about a marriage, I ended up being the right person for them. And we had a great relationship, and we won. It doesn't, now Bill Polian had a track record. He'd put together Super Bowl winning teams. But again, the marriage was good. I was someone that Bill wanted. We worked well together. And that's what it's all about. Whether one guy's there, whether you come together, it's got to be where you and the general manager can work together as a unit. It's got to be a good marriage, or it's not going to work.
Well, I guess if we're going to stick with the marriage analogy, the Pittsburgh Steelers, that would be marriage goals, because they get in a relationship and they just never leave. Okay, that's it. Yeah. And you look at Mike Tomlin. We're big fans of Mike Tomlin. Till death do us part, right? Yeah, that's right. Yes. That's it. And we love Tomlin on this show, Coach. And not only are they in the playoffs, but once again, Mike Tomlin's team has a winning record. He's never had a losing record as a head coach. And I just want to ask you, as a Hall of Famer, could you just put that in perspective? We know just from the outside looking in, hey, that's pretty good, but could you take us a little deeper and tell us how unusual that is and what that means?
It's difficult to go through a career and not have a losing record. Mike had the benefit of not taking over a downtrodden franchise. So when he got to Pittsburgh, he didn't have to rebuild it. So that's a plus. But I think the thing that maybe gets underestimated about Mike, when they have a down year, when they have an off year, it's 9-7. A lot of teams would kill for that type of year, and that's an off year in Pittsburgh. So there's something to be said for that. And I know people want a Super Bowl every year and that type of thing, but in the Steelers organization, they have a way of doing things, and they're not going to worry about the occasional off year. They know they've got a good coach. They know they've got a great system, and we're going to stick with it no matter how frustrated the fans get, no matter what everybody else says. And what that does is that lets your players know, hey, we're playing for this coach, because guess what? He's going to be here. So don't think he's not. You've got to adjust to him, and that helps everybody.
You're right. It's much like marriage. There's no blueprint. Every relationship, arranged marriage, stability, everybody's is different. What works in your house doesn't work in mine. Coach, we appreciate it. Hall of Fame coach Tony Dungy, Football Night in America, Tony Dungy. Thank you so much for the knowledge. And we'll see you soon. We'll see you out in L.A.
All right. Looking forward to it, guys.
All right. Take it easy.
Appreciate it, Coach. Thank you. Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave, and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.